Good morning. My name is Dan Dayton, and I am the chairman and CEO of the Doughboy Foundation, which has as its mission to keep faith with the American doughboy from World War I. And it's a great honor for me to be in this place. It was 104 years ago at this moment that the guns went silent on the battlefields of World War I. The armistice had been signed, and the fighting stopped at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Nothing like World War I had ever been seen before on this planet. It was a global conflict that cost millions of lives, a war that only ended after America entered the conflict and ended the stalemate. November 11th became Armistice Day. Today, we know it as Veterans Day, a tribute to those who fought and died in World War I, now encompasses the courage and sacrifice of all American veterans and service members. A fitting honor to the doughboys who fought and won the war that changed the world. They were the first Americans to go to another country that most had never visited, fight in a war they didn't start, and most importantly, were willing to die for peace and liberty for people they'd never met. At this moment, we have men and women stationed all over the world, standing the watch so that you and I can make the choices we take for granted every day as Americans. We remember their sacrifice and their service because it matters to each and every one of us today and tomorrow. We protect our future by remembering our past. In this place, in perpetuity, the doughboys will remind us that liberty must always be defended, strengthened, and cherished. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month belongs to all Americans who have served and will serve this vital mission, and we salute them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, attention! General Barry McCaffrey exemplifies what I've been talking about and all Americans who have answered our nation's call. His distinguished 30-year career in the United States Army included 4 combat tours. He was wounded 3 times. When he retired from active duty, he was the most highly decorated 4-star general in the United States Army. He twice received the Distinguished Service Cross for Valor. He was awarded 2 Silver Stars and 3 Purple Hearts for wounds sustained in combat. He is a passionate and tireless advocate for this World War I memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and personal privilege to welcome General Barry McCaffrey.
Thanks, Dan. Well, Dan, thanks for those introductory remarks, and more importantly to all of you who braved the rain to come on out here, and those particular at distance who are virtually taking part in this ceremony this morning. Let me pay particular note to Dan Dayton, his tiny staff, Meredith Carr, his deputy, and probably most importantly, Terry Hanby, the chairman of the board, without which this $50 million tribute to America's sacrifice in World War I would not have been possible. Terry Hanby in particular, when things are tough, negotiating through the bureaucracy to get a memorial built in Washington, Terry Hanby was absolutely vital. And we're sorry he can't be with us today. The sculptor, Mr. Howard, had been at work on the wall of honor, which is behind me in photographs, part of it in a photograph, part of it in a sketching. bronze sculptural wall, 60 feet by 10 feet. 38 larger-than-life figures. Dan has just come back from England where the final casting is taking place. And please God, on 12 September 2024, we will again come together to commemorate the final work, and it'll be a glorious day, I know. I might also add, for those that are not aware, every day at 5 p.m. we have a bugler here that blows taps. It's a volunteer organization. The point of it is to keep faith with the American doughboy. And I thank the two buglers who are here today. One, I might add, from the Baltimore Philharmonic, for all of them who stepped forward to keep this tremendous tradition going. Some very brief comments about World War I and why we're here and why the memorial's here. To start with, it was a monstrous war. It was a war that didn't need to be fought. It was a war based on fear, on bad political leadership, on diplomatic failures, on arrogance on the part of military officials. It largely started because of the Kaiser and Germany's fear of mobilization by the Russians, the French, the Brits, and others. But nonetheless, it did not have to be fought, triggered by an assassination at the far end of the earth. And yet the outcome was 20 million killed and 21 million wounded. I might add, when you talk about those who were killed, 8.5 million of them were soldiers, the rest were civilians. So it devastated, in particular, Europe, but as Dan mentioned, it was a global conflict. And the outcome of it was it destroyed Germany, it ended the Kaiser's regime, it ended the Russian Empire, it ended the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Most historians will argue it directly set up World War II because of a failed peace administration. It brought the communist nightmare and Stalin to the Russian people and created the Soviet Union with a follow-on 50 years of trouble there. And it also, and we should underscore this, it ushered in the American century. When we first engaged in World War I, U.S. was the leading agricultural nation on the face of the earth, the leading industrial nation. At 103 million people, we had a larger population than any European country except Russia. But we had 98,000 men and women in the armed forces. That's it. And we started to organize, and essentially we were involved in combat for little more than 200 days. And yet in that period, we had 116,000 killed and 204,000 wounded. And I underscore that number because that's a greater number killed in action than in both Korea and Vietnam from the American perspective. And we were, the rate of casualties was higher than that of World War II. We deployed an untrained, ill-equipped army to Europe. The 98,000 soldiers grew into 5 million in uniform, of whom 2 million got to Europe to fight in France. And the Germans knew that 2 million more were deploying at 10,000 a day. It was an astonishing performance of organization and commitment. And that, by the way, that 2 million man U.S. Marine and Army presence on the front was bigger than the French Army in 1918, who by then, given the catastrophic losses that the Allies had suffered in Europe, were down to 1.6 million. So it was an incredible performance of sacrifice, of valor, of commitment, and I think fairly you can say that we helped rescue civilization. When General Ludendorff had the collapse of Russia took place, he moved all his forces to the west. The Brits and the French managed to stop him, but then when he saw the 350,000 soldiers and Marines attacked during the Meuse-Argonne offensive, he said he realized he had to sue for peace. We're here today, primarily those were bells of peace that this sailor rung, bells of peace, to remind ourselves of the importance of avoiding war when possible. We're here to remember that military preparedness and deterrence is what the U.S. Armed Forces is supposed to stand for. And finally, we're here in memory of the Doughboys and their immense sacrifice in Western Europe. So, Dan, thanks for allowing me to join this group, both virtually and here in presence in Pershing Park.
Okay, we'll do the wreath.
Okay.
Just take one step forward. Just touch the wreath. One step back. And hand salute. Thank you, sir.
Good to be with you, Dan.
Good to be
Well
with
done.
you.
Yeah.
That concludes today's ceremony. Thank you all for being with us today.
Yeah, that was well done.
Thank you. Good comments. Yeah, good comments.